Welcome back. North Korea fired 3 missiles towards Japan just as the G20 was meeting in China. If you want the definition of provocation, Michael, this is it.
It's amazing what the North Koreans are willing to do nowadays, especially since the host of the G20 meeting in Hangzhou was China. And for them to reach out with their testing program and also send missiles very far away from their coastlines, all the way into basically the EEZ of Japan, where without warning, so that if anyone had been in that particular region, there was a very decent chance, well, quite remote, all right, but still, there was a chance that they could actually have hit someone. Wow, you really are going all out against anyone, even the people who are supposedly your friend.
A couple of weeks ago, they launched it from a submarine. That was a big deal.
That was a huge deal. It's a big leap in terms of technology, and it certainly makes it very, well, it's kind of an interesting thing having to do with the MOD here. The MOD, the Ministry of Defense, would like to have some kind of capability to engage in preventative or preemptive attacks, so that, even though that would seem to be utterly violating Article 9 of the Constitution, that you would be able to do a preemptive strike against a North Korean missile site. If you have missiles now on submarines, forget it. You're out of that business.
Right.
So it's a very interesting play here, but in terms of international capabilities, it's a huge jump.
Right. People watch this very carefully because there are signals that they're trying to send. I mean, they're not trying to hit Japan, they're sending signals. But
come on! Oh wait, you saw? I don't know. Maybe you didn't. But if in the photographs that the North Korean news agency released, they had at one point they have a missile range map, and if you blow that up, the line, the circle. Most of Western Japan is inside that range map.
Right.
That they're holding while they're celebrating the successful launch. Yes, it is.
Well, yes, had the trajectory been moved, yes, they would have been able to hit Japan. That's one of the signals that they want people to pay attention to. The other signal, though, is that these missiles were fired from mobile launch pads.
Now, that was another one. It's going to make it very difficult, again, for any kind of preemptive strike. If you have a fixed launch site, then you can fix on it. But here, if they're from mobile sites, the game's over, at least in terms of Japan's capabilities, not in terms of the United States's. But the United States is not going to go to war with North Korea over a potential missile strike, especially if they have this constant stream of tests.
Right.
When is it suddenly actually a sneak attack? You will not be able to tell.
Well, the Japanese have 4 Aegis Destroyers, state-of-the-art destroyers.
With SM-3 anti-missile systems.
Right.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are pretty much dedicated to the North Korean issue, and then probably the other 2 are down toward the Spratlys.
Well, no. There's the thing you have to understand about an Aegis destroyer. It can take down missiles over an immense area. Basically, the map of Japan is a very long country in terms of distance, and then its territories, its maritime territories, stretch very, very far to the south. You would only need 2 Aegis destroyers to cover the entire area, and all of South Korea would be covered as well, and Taiwan as well. So that a single Aegis destroyer can take care of a vast area. The comparison is that if instead of having land-based missile systems in Europe, which is what they have, if they just bought 3 Aegis destroyers, all of the EU would be protected from missiles from anywhere. They are extremely effective weapons, platforms, and defense platforms. The only thing is that they have to rotate out, and the other thing is that they have to see the missile coming.
Right.
And you can do matters with angle, with trajectory, so that the missile's already splashed down before you've actually had any kind of reaction. And there is some question about what, if anything, the Aegis Destroyers saw.
Right. Well, the other thing about one of the weaknesses of the Aegis Destroyers, it has trouble locking in when more than one missile is fired, and they fire 2 around the same time.
That sounds to me like budget poking for an extra budget allocation. 4 of Japan's 6 Aegis destroyers have the missile systems on them. This sounds like they're just trying to get them for the other 2. And hello, January. Hello, new national budget. I'm really cynical in this regard. Well, I have to be, because the capabilities of Aegis destroyers are really fantastic.
They had an emergency meeting at the Prime Minister's residence, and they made a decision. If they launch, let's try and shoot them down. They weren't very successful.
Well, that's one of the things that's really peculiar about what the protocols are at this time.
Right.
Because the missiles, at least the missile tests, are landing not within Japan's territorial waters, but within its economic exclusion zone. What are the orders that have been given?
How provocative is this provocation?
Yeah, that's right. At what point do you shoot it down? My good friend Robert Dujarric at ICAS, at the Institute for Contemporary Asian Studies, says, imagine what would happen if it were the Israelis. The Israelis wouldn't even make it to the EEZ. There would be no question that every single one would be shot down. With Japan, it's very vague as to what would really be considered an actionable threat.
Friend. Right. Well, it's kind of like the North Koreans thumping their nose at the Japanese, but
they thump their nose at their Chinese friends. Right during the middle of the G20 doing this. They could have done it another week. But it's just absolutely offensive in every way.
What are you going to do about it? I mean, really, what are the Japanese going to do about it? I think they're testing that limit, and it's a pretty dangerous game, but I think it's a safe one that they can play.
Well, it is true. And there is, of course, the aspect that the North Koreans are extremely convenient for the Chinese, because whatever Chinese misbehavior there may be, and there's plenty of misbehavior currently in the South China Sea,
mischief islets.
The mischief reef, and
this is really incredible.
And the Chinese can always say, yeah, but look at Pyongyang. Come on. Maybe we're not entirely up to snuff, but look at Pyongyang.
Right.
And that argument actually is pretty good.
Yes, right. Well, they waited until after the G20 summit finished, and now all of a sudden the barges, the ships are going over towards the mischief reefs. It looks like
the Scarborough Shoal is becoming a very interesting situation. Are there dredges there? Are there construction ships there? Is it just Chinese Coast Guard vessels and fishing vessels, their usual modus operandi to get things all heated up? What does this have to do with the relationship between Japan and the Philippines, which got a lot warmer when Duterte met with Abe?
And he didn't say anything about Abe's mother.
He didn't say anything about Abe's mother, and he also gladly accepted one of the top-of-the-line ships from Japan's Coast Guard as a new package of maritime security goods and services provided by Japan.
Right, and this time they're not used or mothballed. These are brand new ships.
The brand new ships, and the biggest ones that Japan makes, big, armored, and with a good-sized cannon on the front to kill, I guess, to deter illegal fishing.
A good-sized cannon is not going to help very much. I mean, well, what the Chinese have done is actually brilliant. They have built an artificial island out in the South China Sea.
There are many of them, yeah.
Yes, and they're developing this. I mean, the Americans are flying threateningly by, but the Chinese say, look, we're just building tourist spots.
Yeah, they say that. But let's try to get back to the DPRK.
Okay. Well, no, the reason why I'm mentioning that is because it is a kind of a trade-off. The more threatening, the more provocative the North Koreans become, the Chinese could probably use that and say, look, we'll have them stop that. They won't be shooting any more missiles past Hokkaido, right? We'll just have them stop that. But this thing that's going on in the South China Sea, please turn a blind eye to it.
There may be that, because the Chinese government certainly has not appreciated Japan's moves toward increasing maritime security in the South China Sea, getting involved in that situation, and have warned them off directly. Certainly, having the DPRK messing up far Northeast Asia is in their interest, and also having the ability to pull on the chain, maybe, when when the attack dog gets a little
Right.
bit too ornery, is something that it's one of their diplomatic tools. Sure.
You know, the Russians were involved as well. They had ships also in the South China Seas. You know, and this kind of combination between China and Russia, as opposed to Japan, has got to be, you know, really somewhat scary because, you know, Putin and Abe are going to be meeting. They're going to be talking about the Northern Territories. Who knows what's going to happen there? Maybe some horse trading.
They're certainly going to also be talking about North Korea and whatever pull that Russia still has there. And if Abe doesn't use that, well, then he's really not making a good use of the Putin-Abe friendship that we've seen, and we saw that again in the meetings this last week. We have now a summit that's all set up. But for some reason the DPRK doesn't get put into a box, and its missile tests have been constant. It had a nuclear test, a quite successful one. We are now past a tipping point, and they are going to have missiles that are reliable. Until the past few years, they've been putting up these Tepodongs, most of which have been careening out of control or have to be exploded soon after takeoff, whatever. Now they will have this consistent large missile testing program that is going to perfect these things. And at the same time, they still have the nuclear program going on. It's a new ball game, and it's an extremely dangerous one. And Japan has no means now to respond to it.
What's the end game here?
God, who knows what the end game is?
I mean, they could keep developing, having better missiles, ones that could hit, you know, continental United States as well.
Well, that's all the way down the line, and certainly would provide another level of U.S. involvement. And another way of actually pulling the U.S. and holding it and keeping it involved in the Northeast region. That obviously is not in China's interest.
For what purpose would that
be?
Yeah.
And it would have a great deal of anger toward the DPRK for having created that situation, which may be one of the reasons why we're seeing such short-range missiles being tested right now, as compared to long-range Tepodongs, which do bring the U.S. into the equation. Until it becomes... It's really up to the Chinese. They're either playing a waiting game with the regime in Pyongyang, or it's simply part of a they're worse than we are game that really makes it so that it's very difficult for Japan and the Japanese government and the Abe government to be as standoffish and successfully standoffish toward the Chinese as they have been.
Well, you remember in the Clinton administration, they awarded concessions to the North Koreans to stop the nuclear program, to settle down, to calm down a bit. They were somewhat successful, but then they ramped up again, and looks like they were snookered.
Well, I don't think that's at all the case. I think we snookered them too. We never delivered the nuclear power plants that we promised in terms of the light water reactors that were supposedly going to be paid for and constructed by South Korea and Japan for the power needs of the country. And yes, North Korea at night is jet black. There's just they have no means of powering anything except seemingly these manufacturing sites for advanced weaponry. Both sides reneged on it in one way or another. The issue, though, is the Chinese should be in charge of their satellite country, but they're not. And while that might have short-term benefits for the Xi administration, in the long term, it's going to go badly. It's just not going to end well unless a miracle occurs, and you can't rely on miracles. You cannot rely on the Kim dynasty to suddenly get someone so upset that someone shoots Kim Jong-un in the head. Instead, he's shooting other people in the head to make sure they don't get any uppity ideas. When you're relying on that kind of behavior and that kind of level of sudden surprise disruption, we're down a dangerous road.
Being provocative is what the North Koreans do the best, Please stay tuned. We're going to continue to watch this. It has ramifications geopolitically all throughout Asia. We're going to watch this. You should too.